Welcome to the broadcast today. I am so thrilled to be speaking about cosmic intelligence and the spiritual hierarchies. And the conversation today is about a book that John and I and Tyler have worked on, which will be coming out soon, called Cosmic Intelligence and the Spiritual Hierarchies. And I'm here with John Barnwell, our editor and our proofreader, and a person who has a great deal of input into all of these things to make sure we don't make mistakes. Welcome to the show, John.
Hello, Douglas and Lady Tyler, of course. Yes, this is really a daunting subject, and I sent you a little message earlier of the Wolfram von Eschenbach. This is him. That's his crest, and he wrote Parsifal. And in Parsifal, it says, "Whom does the Grail serve?" And so that's why we're here.
You and I had already previously done, long before now, I don't know how many shows talking about cosmic intelligence. And so that will be in the description box below. Tyler will make that available to people because we have talked about this subject of cosmic intelligence many, many times. And when we do, we find out that no matter who it is, whether it's Novalis or whether it's A.E., George William Russell, whether it's Emerson, whether it's Goethe, whether it's Steiner, it doesn't matter. If you want to understand going from human consciousness into cosmic consciousness, which we could call angelic consciousness, you're going to go through 3 stages. And in the end, you'll come out at a 4th, and then you'll have a 5th step to take. And the 3 stages are, though not recognized by people who describe them necessarily, the stages of developing morality in the realm of your thinking, which creates moral imagination. And then developing in your feelings moral inspiration. And then developing in your will moral intuition. Those are the 3 steps of cosmic intelligence, but they're also the 3 steps of initiation. And they're the 3 steps you need to take to develop what Rudolf Steiner calls an alphabet of the cosmos, or an alphabet of the spirit, or a language of the spirit, which Tyler goes into in her 3 books, the Gospel of Sophia, in great detail. So if you don't have a language of the spirit, then you're going to need one if you're going to communicate with angels or any of the other 8 spiritual hierarchy that are above those angels. And so what we're going to talk about today is the content of this book. And this book is, John started off with a very serious note, and that's true. You can't get any more serious than this. And you can't get any more frequent question asked of a clairvoyant than, what does an angel look like? What is there a guardian angel? I mean, that's the first thing that is going to be asked by anyone on the path of spiritual knowledge. So Wolfram von Eschenbach, digesting the whole gift of Christ, which is what the Holy Grail is all about, gave us a path of initiation that you can follow. And you have to go through many stages of initiation, because you have to go through earth, water, air, fire. You have to go through those 3 preliminary stages of advancement: moral imagination, moral inspiration, moral intuition. And then you come to what a great deal of this book is about. And that's because it's probably the most spiritual content that can be talked about with normal vernacular, normal words, and that is your conscience. So this book goes deep into the very questions that you need to answer if you wish to meet an angel. And I tell you, literally, I don't know anyone who doesn't believe in angels. They may have, every single person has a different concept of it. But the reality of the angelic hosts is basically what gave us the revelation of all religions. And at the core of our religions are the same moral content. So in fact, one could say all religions, which is a relinking, that's what religion means, relinking yourself to your higher consciousness, your higher ego, your higher self, is in fact a meeting of the 9 spiritual hierarchy.
Yes. And getting back to the question about, well, gee, what what am I going to see when I see an angel? In the lecture cycle that clears that up most specifically of Rudolf Steiner's is the spiritual hierarchies and their reflections in the physical world. In the lecture 7, The Constitution of Spiritual Beings and Humanity, that was given on April 16th, 1909, he clarifies the way in which the physical, etheric, astral body go through its transformations, and exactly what are the beings that actually use those particular realms to manifest their state of being. And because you have that which is arising from the human kingdom, but you also have that that's coming from above, from the divine spiritual world. And so, being a human being, you say, okay, in your initiation, you're going to want to bring about the transformation of your astral body. Well, why is that so? Well, Rudolf Steiner says that when one passes across the threshold at death, that you have that period called Kamaloka, in which about 1/3 of your life, or the amount of time you spent sleeping, you go through the experience of Kamaloka and the after death state, in which you encounter the nature of your being in the astral world. Well, through the development that's implied within the Grail, it says that when one transforms one's astral body, you don't leave all that uh, waste product, so to speak, behind, because that which is not pure enough to go higher is left behind, and it becomes a shared burden for humanity. The astral world has all this uh, dissolving remains of human activity. And when you get to the point to where you've reached that uh, state of spirit self, where you've actually come into relationship with your guardian angel, then you don't leave all that behind. You get to take the whole thing with you. And likewise with the etheric body for the life spirit and the physical body and the spirit man. But to gain an insight into what we're talking about, Rudolf Steiner says that Earth evolution, a planetary chain, for example, let's go back to old Saturn, that old Saturn developed, and when it reached its culmination point is when it began to turn. And when it began to turn, that's when the decline of old Saturn began. See, in Earth evolution, it all leads up to the incarnation of Christ and the mystery of Golgotha. And after that point, the Earth is going into a period of decline. And so, what we want to be is participants in that which is evolving out of Earth evolution, not the things that are going to be left behind that will eventually contribute to like a lunar eight sphere existence. And so you could see that you want to be participating in that evolving to the next planetary condition state of an angel. That's what the job is right now. That's what we're working on.
Absolutely. And if you can't see an angel in another person, you just need to keep practicing. And if you can't see the angel in yourself and realize that your own guardian angel is a part of yourself, and that the whole angelic host, all the worlds of angels, and we'll give them names in a minute, but all these different 9 ranks of angels are all connected. None of them stand alone. I used to say to people, if you've ever seen an angel, tell me your experience of an angel. Yeah, well, that's not an angel because they were alone. Angels will connect you to other angels. and they'll connect you to archangels, and they'll connect you to time spirits called Archai, and they'll connect you to Elohim, or what's called in Christianity the Exousiai, and right on up the ranks, the dunamis, the Kyrieutetes, the thrones, the cherubim, the seraphim. These are 9 ranks, but above them is the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And each, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, control one of those 3 groups of 3. So down here near us, the angels, archangels, archais, that's the lowest. They're called the third hierarchy. Then there's the second hierarchy. Those are the ones in the middle who live mostly on the sun and work through the planets. And then there's ones who live beyond that in the stars and even beyond the stars. And that's the first rank of the hierarchy. They receive from the Trinity the plan. And then with the help of the thrones, and which is the third rank in the first hierarchical rank, they help the second rank create all that the divine plan is meant to be. And then what is the divine plan? To create human beings who will someday be on a very much higher rank as we evolve over time, so that we can become co-creative beings. Now, those beings down here are little human beings. Well, we're helped out from all of the 9 ranks of the hierarchies. And it's so complicated that literally after 40 years, I'm still understanding the way that the interweaving of the manifestation of the different ranks of hierarchies work. But it's a simple plan. The simple plan is, for some reason, the whole universe was created by a trinity. And in us, we have a trinity. We have 3 trinities. We have a body, a soul, and a spirit. We have a physical body, an etheric body, and an astral body. In our soul, where our ego comes to birth down here on the earth, we have our sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul. And above that, we have our 3 egos, our higher egos, our spiritual egos, which the top one goes beyond what we can even say or comprehend. And this is what we're talking about. This is what interacts with the hierarchy. And it's those 3 spiritual selves are called Manas, Buddhi, Atman in the old terms, but in Steiner's terms, spirit self, life spirit, and spirit human. So the 9 hierarchies are replicated in us, and all those 9 hierarchies donate to us. The higher hierarchy, strangely enough, donates to the lowest aspect that we have, our physical body. The second rank of the hierarchies donates to our soul, and the third rank, so it goes body, soul, and spirit, or physical, etheric, astral. So the second rank relates to the etheric, and the third rank, the closest ones to us, relates to our astral body, because we, as John just described, and the reason he's talking about the Grail is it's a taming of your astral body. But it's not easy, because from the first moment of creation, there were beings who fell backwards. And this is the great distinction for those of you who are anthroposophists who have been working on this all your life. It is important to remember that in the first half of creation, those were donations of spiritual beings who may have fallen back from one rank to a lower rank on purpose to create for us what we need to grow, believing that we're alone in the world, believing that we are, the only one, and that we are somehow a god of our own world. Well, that's all true, but we're just little babies at it. But as we grow, we're going to find out that that is true, and that everything in the universe, because the universe is finite, is in us. We are a perfect 3D holographic replication of what we're describing here as the divine plan. We are the Trinity, and our egos are ourselves rising through the ranks of the hierarchies. And if you understand this, then you get to the fact that Steiner clearly, more than anyone else, shows us the path of initiation, the path of ascension, the path of the prodigal child going back to the heavens where we're created, because our higher ego is not in the physical world at all. It's never in the physical world. And so when we speak of an angel, well, first off, we should go to Dr. Angelus and ask him what he thought about it. Well, it so happens I have a PhD in Dr. Angelus and his opinion about Dionysus, pseudo-Dionysus the Areopagite. and Dionysius the Areopagite and Aristotle, because I did a thesis pointing out that Thomas Aquinas, considered the angelic doctor of the Catholic Church, who at one point, anything he said was considered doctrine and dogma of the Catholic Church, because he was so perfect in everything he did. He even levitated when he said Mass. And his friend Reginald of Piperno would have to grab him by the feet and pull him back down to the earth, okay? And so they told him, no, you can't do this anymore because people are coming from all over like a pilgrimage to see you levitate as you do Mass. This is who Thomas Aquinas was, okay? He was the greatest thinker, so much so that when he thought, or when he went through the action of the Holy Eucharist, he rose up from the ground without, he didn't even know he was levitating. And when he would give a talk, when he'd give his sermon, it could go on forever because he didn't understand time and space. He was into consciousness and even beyond human consciousness. And that's what we're talking about. Cosmic consciousness is beyond human consciousness.
And keep in mind that Thomas Aquinas, at the end of his life, said, all my writings are mere straw. See, so it's on a level that's so profound that you develop ideas regarding what you think it's going to be like. And Rudolf Steiner, in this lecture cycle on the spiritual hierarchies and their reflections in the physical world, he makes reference to that people have difficulty understanding angels because they like to think that, you know, their body has a boundary, that there's a limit. And he says, when dealing with angels, that's not true. He says, you know, you could have an experience of an angel and in a foggy mist, for example, and the outline of the angel, it just kind of blends off into the cosmos. And so he also says that, you know, there could be a point in a brook and there would be 40 angels occupying the same space, so that we want to try and over materialize the way we think of things. But if you look toward the angels, you could think of that which dwells within the realm of the water. With the archangel, then they're referred to as spirits of fire in some of the Rosicrucian writings. And then you have the Archai, that you could see them manifesting also within like a lightning strike. He talks about the fire that arises from a lightning strike, that the Archai could be seen in their physical manifestation, but that we have these things coming at us from every direction, and they can also work together in a compound way, so that there's more than one of them coming through the same experience. For example, with Moses and the burning bush, Christ was working through the Elohim, the archangel, and the angel ultimately to bring that experience together. And so these things are very, very complex. So you want to try and maintain an open set in your thinking and not try to close it in with your over-materialized abstract thinking. And so that's why art is so important. And whom does the Grail serve? Well, it's an artful way of approaching life. And that Rudolf Steiner says that great artists and composers don't always realize what high beings work through them as they create their works of art. And so I frequently make reference to the idea of wisdom, strength, and beauty. And it's that beauty part, that's what ennobles the etheric body into the life spirit.
It's so complex. I'm so glad you brought up lightning. Now I'm going to go off on a tangent because you know how I am about lightning. Steiner also points out, just as John just pointed out, the workings of the three different ranks of the nine hierarchies interpenetrate each other in ways that you can't hardly imagine. And when you start to meditate on it, it'll blow your mind. For instance, John just pointed out that lightning can manifest through the third hierarchy. Well, when it manifests through the first hierarchy, this is what it looks like. The thrones create the activity of the weather above us. Well, and then the lightning, according to another version that Steiner gives us, because it depends upon where you're standing when you're looking at these things. For instance, if you're in a lower rank, you will experience the third hierarchy, second hierarchy, or the first hierarchy. It depends upon which rank you're at. So if you're looking at them, you're looking at they're called the will, harmony, or balance, or beauty, as John just said. It would be the cherubim. So the will is the thrones, the cherubim are this beauty, this harmony. And then above that is the seraphim, who are love. Well, our weather is love. Without it, we have no food, we have no life, and weather pretty much controls most simple-minded people. I mean, literally, if it's a bright, sunshiny day, they don't even know why they're in a good mood. It's really hard to believe people are so unevolved, but most of us are, including myself. So when you see lightning, first off, what had to have happened? There had to have been this motion John described as one of the first things that happened with creation on ancient Saturn. And then, so space had to start moving and friction had to start happening, what we call electrostatic energy. But then what happens when a cold and a warm front come together? It's so dynamic, it needs to be balanced. So it's balanced by the cherubim. So what happens? The cherubim send in lightning to balance the situation. And why did they send it in? Because the seraphim told them out of love to do so. So when we look at weather, we're looking at the shadow of a variety of beings. Now imagine you're casting a shadow. Can you enter into your shadow realm? Can you enter into what is happening in that realm? You created it. Well, that's what happens with the spiritual hierarchy. They create all of this over time through donations, through accretion, through condensation, through solidification. And then at the turning point of time, Christ came and gave us our ego, which can now develop into a spiritual higher ego. And now we have the time in freedom to develop, but there's also opposition. So there are fallen beings in all ranks, and this is where the confusion starts, which are called Luciferic hosts. Luciferic hosts aren't necessarily the Lucifer we meet in our astral body when we tame the dragon. These are beings who've fallen at all ranks, from ancient Saturn, sun, moon, and even falling now, and humans can fall. We can fall from human intelligence and not go forward to angelic cosmic intelligence, but we can fall backwards and become animal intelligence, or a mix of animal and plant intelligence, or a mix of all three of them, mineral intelligence. In other words, you've heard of people, who are in a vegetative state. Well, that's the plant. You know people who are in the animal consciousness state because you see it everywhere. It's called the rat race. It's called war. It's called all those horrible things that make you, really doubt the good in human nature. But we have to have choices. That's what it's about. But in the end, we evolve so high that we help create our own realm, and then we have to give over ourselves to salvage that realm also, to redeem it, just as Christ did. So imagine, the Trinity created all of this. It isn't a pantheism we're talking about. There's one divine being. It just so happens they manifest in three. And in the dual world, they may even manifest in more than one Trinity. And in the human being, they manifest in a trinity of trinities, exactly as the hierarchical beings work. So we have to keep our eye on the Trinity and see that that's our higher self. So as we evolve through these different things, and we begin to understand that, even as I said to John yesterday, how foolish would a person be? By the way, the definition of fool is one who has no spiritual communication with God, according to the Bible. How foolish would one be to see lightning in all of its majesty and not have wonder, awe, and reverence? If you don't, well, then you might want to turn this video off because there's no hope for you. If you can't see the beauty of now, mind you, these are only the shadow of eternal law, eternal spiritual law that manifests as our outer world. But as John also just pointed out, if you want to develop yourself, what do you have to do? First off, like Martin Buber said, there's I and thou. There's also I and that. But anyway, the I and thou, you have to figure out what people are telling you who you are. You have to figure out what the world is telling you who you are by your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. So our I, in the lower sense, comes to us from outside. We think our ego, our I, is in us, and that is silly. So let's go back. When you talk about Thomas Aquinas, you have to realize that he was giving us this, he gave us what we need for the future. Exactly as the student of Paul, Dionysius, gave us in what then later Pseudo-Dionysius wrote down as the exact same 9 hierarchies as Thomas Aquinas talked about. And if you're clever enough, you can take the multiple different versions of Aristotle's categories, which is the basis of all science. Science is looking out into the world and trying to figure it out by quantifying it with measure, number, and weight. So according to Aristotle, Jacob's ladder that leads us into the spiritual divine world to meet these beings, this cosmic alphabet that Rudolf Steiner said, the 9 hierarchies are the cosmic alphabet that spell the world. They're the creative forces of the consonants of the stars. They're the creative forces of the vowels of the planets, and they mix them together to give us the ability to listen to a language of the spirit. And so what did Aristotle, as a very outwardly focused material scientist who led us into materialism? Well, he said there was first quantity, then quality, then relation, then space, time, position, activity, harmony, activity, suffering, and being. But now there's many versions of this. When I studied this, every person who interpreted Aristotle had a different translation for these words. And so in the book that we produced, Cosmic Intelligence and Spiritual Hierarchies, we have shown you multiple versions, Steiner's version of Aristotle's categories and other people's, as well as, of course, numerous charts on how these hierarchies manifest in the outer world. And so this is a cosmic script, Steiner calls it. And if you read the script, it says one of two things. Either that these beings have suffered to create all of this for us, or the cosmic, he says, the inexpressible and completely pervasive nature of cosmic love. That's Christ. So we have, through studying the hierarchy, the ability to study where we're going. And that gives us our own cosmology. They're all interrelated, as John pointed out earlier, and they're interrelated in such ways that we could sit around and talk for literally a week about the manifestations of the spiritual hierarchies. Because, for instance, also in the book is Johannes Trithemius of Sponheim, who wrote about Dionysius the Areopagite, Pseudo-Dionysius, but he gave us the archangelic regencies, approximately 360 years. Steiner gives them quite specifically and tells us that the Archangel Michael came to power in his regency for the next 360 or so years, 365. It's debated. It actually is variable. And he brings a certain quality because he's the Archangel of the Sun. And so he works with an Elohim on the Sun. And the Elohim that worked from the Trinity on the Sun were the 7 major Elohim who Christ worked through to create the human form, the human I am. And it was created on the Sun. And right now, if you think that your higher self, I love people who say, this is my last incarnation. So I look at them and I go, I'm looking for the angel in you. not quite there yet, don't see any wings yet. Maybe a little speck, and they think they're not going to incarnate again because they contacted what? Their earthly higher ego. Well, that's very nice. It's also called the consciousness soul or the spiritual soul. But that's not going to get you to heaven. You can't take anything to heaven from this realm. Now, here I'm going to have to be very harsh about this because, by the way, you don't get to the spiritual world until you've seen hell first. Don't know of a single apparition. Don't know of a single person I've ever met who's met an angel that wasn't shown hell first to show you what you have to get through and leave behind, or you can't communicate with an angel and you won't get the supersensible eyes, ears, and heart. You can't use the 5 senses. You can't even use the 12 senses that Steiner gave us. Those will barely. There's only one of the 12 senses that is going to help you on the other side, and that's the one that recognizes another ego, another spirit entity. But they pass through you there. Well, most of us think, as John said, we're solid. If they had an angel pass through them, they would pass out and they may never recover. Matter of fact, when people tell me they've seen angels, and mind you, I've been clairvoyant all my life. I saw angels. I talked with them since I was a child, okay? And they had a language. And so I didn't want to speak human language because it was disgusting and dirty and filthy. And I did not want to participate in human feeling, which was incredibly selfish. And human actions were barbaric, worse than animals. So I tried to live in a different world altogether. So I like sleep. Because in the sleep realm, you're in the spiritual realm. And it may be stupid to say, but I've never met an angel I didn't like, except a fallen angel. So you have to be very careful when you go into this realm. And as you face this realm and you want to go into it, you're going to have to face the guardian of the threshold, which our next book is going to be about, or 2 books from now. And it is the scariest event of your life because you get to see all of your negativity. You get to see what the angels can't deal with you. They push you away. Most people have no angelic thoughts in their whole life. Many times I look at people and go, I'm looking, and then I ask them questions and I say, what do you think about grace? Have you ever thought about where love comes from? Where is love in yourself? By the way, have you ever become objective and looked at your own thinking process itself? And their answer is blank. Guess what? They've never had an angelic thought in their head. If you're a clairvoyant, when an angel comes into someone, it's like it flies in. I think you tell that story about the blue flower or whatever. That's what you see. If a person has a high moral imagination and a clairvoyant standing next to them, they'll see it. Why? Because it's an angel, not really flying, but passing through them.
Yeah, Douglas is recounting the story where we were watching Gaelic Rinpoche give a talk, and a friend of mine was in front of me, and she didn't realize it, but there was this method that I learned from our friend Ariel that you visualize a rosebud, a golden glowing rosebud, and then you float it inside someone, and then you have it open into a rose. And so I'm doing that just because I figure it's a nice thing to do while I'm sitting here listening to this. And Douglas walks over, he sits down, he goes, how cool, a golden rose. Now, mind you, I didn't tell him about it. He saw it. So when you start to objectify your thinking into imaginations, then you're beginning the process of conversing with that realm, the realm that is the next stage of our evolution, where we develop that moral imagination. But in keeping with understanding this, Rudolf Steiner once said, if you want to have an image of your guardian angel, just think of all the people that you met during the course of a year, and that will give you some idea of the countenance of your guardian angel. So, that's quite a stretch to be able to think that one through. But coming back to what I had said earlier as to that Earth has a period to where it develops and then it goes into decline. The actual center of Earth evolution is in the fourth period of Atlantis. But due to certain effects of the decline, the decline became so severe that Christ intervened in the incarnation in the mystery of Golgotha, so that we have this turning point in time, and that the earth at that point had descended so far into manifestation that Rudolf Steiner said by about the third or fourth century it would have reached the end of its process. But that was revitalized by the intervention of Christ coming from the realm of the Holy Trinity, and of course, with all this complexity of involvement that we refer to manifesting in the realm of the exousiae and the archangels and the archai. The whole symphony is a good way of looking at these things, that there's this symphony of beings that's enabling you to reach your destination. That's what they're here for. And like Douglas says, but there's also the counter image of those beings in the backward or retarded spirits. And in that realm, though, some of those did it out of their own volition, that they wanted to rebel against the divine plan. But there are those that are there because they picked it as a mission. And so it's necessary to have that opposition, just as you have a light and shadow, that there's a necessity for that opposition for creation to come into being. And so many of the things that happen are not even close to what you think that they are. Uh, for example, if you go back to the ancient Atlantean period, Rudolf Steiner talks about how divine beings used a human form to be able to communicate with mankind, and that the leaders of the oracles, the mystery centers in Atlantis, were not just ordinary human beings, but that these were higher beings that were working through the human form to be able to lead mankind. And he gets into talking about the various stages of that. For example, on the angelic stage is a Buddha, on the archangelic stage is the bodhisattva, and then on the Archai level is what they called it in the East, the Jnani Buddhas. So this is present in the doctrines of all true, genuine, deep occultism. It's not just in one particular school. We just happen to be aligned with the school of Dionysius, the Areopagite, when he and Demarus in around 44 AD encountered Paul, and that's in the Acts 17. Toward the end of Acts 17, it's described, and you have him mentioning the understanding that arose in Dionysius. And Dionysius, in his own letters, talks about how it happened for him, that when Paul explained the mystery of Golgotha, he thought back to where he was at the time that the mystery of Golgotha happened, and that he was in Alexandria, and he experienced the darkening that Paul referred to that took place during the crucifixion. So that played a part in his becoming eventually the first bishop of Athens and the head of the school of esoteric Christianity that was founded by Paul in Athens at that meeting at the Areopagus, and that's like the center of town. That's where all the important things happen. And so this is a more than fascinating study that takes more than a lifetime to be able to encompass even a part of it.
I'm glad you mentioned the theosophical or Indian, ancient Indian, the Vedas and the Puranas and all that good stuff, because we put that in the book too, so that you can get all these different descriptions that go back for thousands of years, basically back to the beginning of written history or any written writing, or actually oral traditions that were finally written down. Everyone in every tradition speaks of these things. So how can it not be true? Now, here's the reality. The reality is, how many people on the earth are ready to begin to even turn around and face their own guardian angel? That would be such a small number. I less than one, probably, because when you do, you get terrified. Rudolf Steiner said that most people who think they've seen God have seen the hem of the garment of their guardian angel. That's what most people see. And, I was used by the Catholic Church for people who were possessed, and I worked with an exorcist, as well as they would send us out to look at apparitions and angel manifestations. So I've gone to so many, I can't enumerate all of them for you, but most of them are not angel manifestations at all. And when you do meet them, what you meet is a pure person. You'll either meet a scam, or you'll meet fallen beings who are basically mesmerizing people with hallucinations, literally physical, crowd hallucinations. And I've been there. I've seen this. I've watched the people go into trance watching a fallen angel try to appear to manifest as an angel. And so you have to be very careful of this, and you have to be very moral. And if you haven't developed yourself through renunciation, through it used to be asceticism, but now it's really just renunciation of the sense-bound world. Your biggest hindrance to meeting your guardian angel is your sense-bound thinking, your materialism. To believe that Maya is all there is. That is your angel. Many people's guardian angels don't even hang out with them because they're not needed, because people are not doing much. Okay, they're automatons. They just simply do what a robot would do, an animal would do. But when you think a good thought, it's sending up a red flag into the spiritual world. The angels come flying in. Are you kidding? You better be ready. But here's what the problem is. You're going to burn like hell. Look at what Parsifal had to go through. Look at what the Grail Knights had to go through. Look at Amfortas, the wounded Fisher King of the Grail mythology. It's about suffering. And so if you're not willing to suffer another being to come into you because you're egotistic, materialistic, you don't believe it, whatever, 1,000 jillion reasons that people don't suffer accepting the grace and mercy of the divine plan and of the hierarchies, that's why it doesn't happen. Plus, you carry all your sins with you. And if you don't every night go over what your conscience tells you, for instance, before you go to sleep, here I can tell you right now, if you're ever going to meet an angel in your life, okay? If you don't look at your day and see what you did wrong before you go to sleep, you are not going to meet an angel in this life or in your dream life. And when you do, you wouldn't know what it was anyway, because it is nothing like you've ever seen or heard or experienced before. Now, in all the traditions, it comes down to this. First off, you have to make yourself the empty grail, the vessel. Buddhism calls it emptiness, the pure light, or the clear light of emptiness. But emptiness is not infinite emptiness. It is a finite container. And when this is understood, then you can have what's called in Tibetan Buddhism Dzogchen, quick enlightenment. So there's, for Steiner, preparation, enlightenment, and initiation. So preparation is you do your moral work, and that's in all the paths. All paths say start with morality.
Yeah, in Buddhism they call it sunyata, and it's emptiness, but it's emptiness that's a fullness.
Exactly. And then they say in Dzogchen, and then it's as simple as this: the lights, the sound, and the words. You go, what? I studied all my life, finally got to the secret of Tibetan Buddhism and Dzogchen through Bon, and what do I find out? Clear light, become empty, and then just use your super sensible organs for a new type of seeing, hearing, and like music, but harmonic music, and then the word, okay? Now, let me give you an example of this. I got on a train when I was really young. I was headed to Dornach, Switzerland, as a pilgrimage because all those spiritual anthroposophists were there. Oh yeah, I found one. But anyway, before I got there, I got in this train real late at night and I stepped on this train. I'd been waiting for hours. I was so tired and something touched me on my shoulder. And I turned around and looked and nothing was there. And then a voice said, "Get off the train now." I got off the train because I, at that point, had already learned to listen to the voice that speaks, and which is my little voice inside, like my conscience, which tells me when I'm doing something wrong. Notice the conscience doesn't tell you when you're doing something right. That's for you to figure out. But anyway, it tells you when you're wrong. So I was doing something wrong. So some being, a very male voice, but a voice that I knew loved me, and the hand on my shoulder passed love into me. So I literally had a choice, but I didn't have a choice because I wanted to follow the Spirit. Stepped off the train, went over to the bench and cried my eyes out. A few minutes later, that train wrecked and 115 people died on it. This happens all the time, folks. If you can be chosen to receive the intuition from your angel, but for you to get there, you're going to have to do a lot of work.
Yeah, that's in the Rosicrucian stream considered to be receiving the call of Christian Rosenkreuz. And when that happens, it's an indication that before you were born, you made an agreement that you were going to participate in this work of redemption that's implied within the Rosicrucian stream, which is an aspect of the Grail stream. And so what we have here, what we've been trying to share with those of you that are interested out there, is that what Rudolf Steiner once referred to as the Grail language. He says, this is the Grail language. This is the Christ language. This is the language that you need to be able to communicate with Christ and the company of beings that are involved in this whole process. And so it behooves you to learn the language of the Grail, because then when you encounter these things, you will have at least something to be able to build a bridge in your understanding of these things that are so profound, and their own nature is so strong that it can overwhelm you, so that by developing a cosmology, you're creating a Grail. You're creating a means by which you can receive the moral imagination, moral inspiration, and moral intuition that arises as a result of your own personal efforts in this regard.
So true, John. And I'm going to emphasize this. Anyone who's telling you that they talk to angels and doesn't tell you these things I'm telling you, they don't talk to angels. Because here's how it works. If you have a true intuition and you ignore it, it harms you. You have to do what is the grace of God, the will of God. That is an intuition, and an intuition is always correct by definition. So if you get an intuition that says, go over and tell that person that they have a heart problem they need to go see a doctor about immediately, and you don't do it, you just incurred that karma, shared karma of that person. So Rudolf Steiner says that, for instance, take a stethoscope and put it on your arm and move your arm. You're going to hear loud music. Very loud music, kind of like the music that the Tibetans play when they play those long horns and beat on drums and play bells and crash the cymbals together. That's what you'll hear in your body if you hear what the first hierarchy does in your body. Rudolf Steiner said that if you could hear that, and that would then constitute having an intuition, but our intuitions are for a nanosecond, folks. And it basically tells you what to do, gives you the courage to do it, gives you the love to do it. And you can only get the intuition by love, period. And no such thing as an intuition that doesn't come by love, period. And intuitions come from the beings of love, the seraphim, from that realm, that hierarchy. But he literally said that if you were clairvoyant, and you could enter into your body and begin to take over for the work that the spiritual hierarchy does to run your 7 organs, your liver and your gallbladder and your heart and your blood circulation. If you could even experience one part of that, guess what would happen to you? You would die right on the spot. Now, I've told you stories, people who've listened to my crazy stories, but when I was a child, all the time it happened, I would start to hear the spin of the earth and it would knock me to the ground and I thought I was going to die. But I'd listen long enough, and though it was a very horrifyingly scary sound, and I'd go into the core of the earth and I'd be in the core of the earth and the spin of the earth at the same time, and it was ripping me to pieces, I loved it. And I loved the sound of the angels. The images of the angels, they also have a sound when they flow in with their images. But these aren't normal images. These are literally archetypal entities, beings that create the form and force of the universe. The etheric formative forces are created by these beings' shadows. So when you hear an angel, when you see the angels manifesting, when you hear the archangels manifesting through sound, the harmony of the spheres, it's called, and you can feel the planets and know whether they're in dissonance or they're in harmony, when they're in concordance or not. It's sound. But the ultimate thing, and this is also the light ether, the sound ether, and the life ether. And so when you can experience these things, and those are the ethers used by those beings, but it's not the beings. That's like if I pick up a tool and use it. It's a tool, but it's not me. So what happens when the cosmic word speaks? The whole universe, it's like the whole universe is speaking through you, and it sounds as if you are speaking, but with like your higher self voice, okay? Now here's the temptation, folks. Imagine if you were to see an angel, what would happen? I can tell you many stories of people who did legitimately see angels when they were young and then later didn't and became really bad people because they freaked out over it. As John pointed out, you can become quite imbalanced with this stuff. But for sure, if you have an experience of an angel or archangel or an archai, this is what happens. You are given a vision in the spiritual world, like a seer. You know, they call them seers, but they don't really see the spiritual world. And you're like a prophet because you hear the words. And then when these words sound, it generally, like an inspiration, lasts for a second in your brain, and it can then give you inspiration for the rest of your life. There are people like, I know lots of people like this, John being one of them. They can go into the realm of the archangel and just play music spontaneously that is like divine. And you say, can you do that again? No, I can't do that again. No, what was you doing? You were communing with spiritual beings in that realm of music. So that's the lights, the sound, and the word. And when you hear the word, that is the reason the Gospel of John says what it does. The word is the secret. In ancient India, you have the threefold hierarchy of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Did I say that? Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva? No. Yes. And then you have their consorts. And so where do they come from? Well, they came from Vak, V-A-C, which means voice, word. So even in the most ancient philosophies we have, all creation came from the word. But this is a word that manifests as it sounds. And you've heard of the language of the birds or the language of the dragon blood. You've heard all these different stories that people can hear. Then the birds speak to them, the plants speak to them, minerals speak to them, like Paracelsus. This happens, folks. So if you want this to happen, you simply let it happen. But you first must do the moral preparation. You first must prepare yourself. Now, Steiner says you have to concentrate. First off, you have to relax, and you have to set aside a time rhythmically every single day, usually in the morning and the evening, to create meditation. But what you do is you first have to relax and you concentrate, then you contemplate, then you meditate, then you pray, and then you commune. You literally can walk right into the spiritual world without legs and feet, but without anything physical. But when you get in there, it's because you put out the effort for it. So here he gives you a meditation. Meditate on the black cross and the red roses, the 7 roses on it. Meditate as hard as you can. Contemplate what that means in terms of spiritual aspects. Meditate on the spiritual aspects, because for Steiner, meditation is meditating on spiritual content, not just meditating on your breath, which is just mindfulness, vipassana meditation, mindfulness. Yeah, meditate on breathing, meditate on your thoughts going in and out. All that's good, but that isn't going to get you there. You have to meditate on content that is spiritual content. The beings manifest. So you meditate, as John pointed out. You want to know what an angel looks like? Think of every person karma has put in your path through your whole life. That's going to get you into the feeling or the even images and the intuitions of your karma. And what is karma? Karma is what's holding you up from going into the spiritual world. So if you can do these things, they arise naturally if at first you learn the language. It's like a child trying to learn reading. If you don't learn the letters first, you can't get the meaning from the language, which is only represented by the letters. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about representations of the hierarchy. But once you meditate enough on these representations, they lead you to the beings. And then after that, hang on to your hat, folks, because if you're worthy enough to get to have a communion with your own guardian angel or any higher being, they take over from there. And then they're going to use you to do their work. Because remember, we are the eyes and the ears and the hands of God on the earth. Through conscience, we are God on the earth. And through love, we manifest God on the earth. So as long as you do the preparation work, and we're going to talk about that in the next video, because what's the best thing to prepare yourself for this? Imagination, inspiration, intuition, higher thinking, feeling, and willing. Yes, but the 2 things I mentioned at first, which we'll go further into in the next talk, conscience and love, the cherubim and the seraphim. Imagine that. Every time you love, oh, I know, people think love is theirs and they give it away. Nonsense. Love flows through you. It's not yours, and it's infinite, and you have infinite capacity for love to flow through you. That's what Christ taught everyone. And we are the cosmos. So we are Christ the minute that we get our selfishness out of the way.
Yes, and I realize it's challenging in this particular time period because we're in the consciousness soul period, and the consciousness soul is I, me, mine. It's like this self-involved thing. It's because it's consolidating itself into an individuated being, and so it has this tendency towards that self-centeredness. But because when you approach truth, you have to realize that truth is really the most social thing there is, right? That as you realize truth, you are participating in something that's just not your own personal possession, but that you are participating in it. And so it harkens back to the words of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu means little turtle, but he's like a 6th century BC Chinese philosopher. And he said, you receive the value of a thing, of a pot. He's referring to a pot. You receive the value of a pot through what is there and its usefulness from what is not. And so if you take that and you think about it, mind you, these things are meant to be like triggers or things that evoke a state of being. But just go back to the sigil that they're putting on all their books, and I put them on my reprints of my books too, because it's like the 2 spirals, that it's the gap between the 2 spirals. That's where it's happening. See, Rudolf Steiner says that the exousiae, the spirits of form, the Elohim, that they work through the gaps in the synapses, the synaptic gap in your nervous system. They're working through what is not there. And so what is happening in that synaptic gap? I mean, that's just taking that one thought and trying to understand it is mind expanding. And then when you get into understanding the rotational movement of the heart and the blood and how that all arises, there's all these mysteries that are yet to be unfolded. And so it's wonderful that we can explore these things with you in light of the massive endeavors of Rudolf Steiner.